Aloha! The subject for this slide presentation will be ancient Hawaiian fishing methods. Before discussing the specific methods for catching fish in ancient Hawaii, it is necessary to understand some information about the object of these fishing methods, the fish themselves. The clear, warm waters surrounding the islands of Hawaii are home to more than 650 different kinds of fish, which range in size from the small, brilliantly colored reef fish to the huge fish of the deep, such as marlin and tuna. Hawaii's waters not only abound with fish, there is other sea life as well. Crab, eel, turtle, octopus, and lobster are also abundant and were actively pursued by the early Hawaiian fishermen. Along with fish, these creatures formed an important part of the ancient Hawaiians' diet. Fish was a major source of protein for the early Hawaiians. Meat was not part of the everyday meal. Only during festive occasions did everyone partake of meat. Fish were eaten raw, dried, and cooked. These food dishes, belonging to a person of high rank, include a platter for fish and a gourd for water. The small bowl on the left was for food scraps that had to be disposed of carefully so that the high-ranking chief could not be preyed against. Catching fish was one of the most serious occupations of the early islanders. Today, most of us consider fishing a form of relaxation, but this was not so in early Hawaii. Since fish was their main source of protein, nothing could have been more important to the fishermen than bringing home to their families a net full of life-sustaining sea life. Failure to catch fish meant going without one of the main sources of food. Naturally then, the early Hawaiians developed and perfected their fishing skills to a highly successful degree. The fisherman, called Lavaia in Hawaiian, was a person of importance in his village, for the people relied upon his skills to provide food for their sustenance. He learned his fishing skills from his father, who had learned from his father before him. He knew how to navigate his canoe at night by the position of the stars. He knew that the tides controlled whether the fish would be hungry or not. He knew when it would be safe to fish in the open sea by the types of clouds in the sky. He knew where the best fishing grounds were, because this knowledge was passed on from generation to generation. He designed, made, and repaired his own nets. He fashioned his own bone hooks and tied these hooks with care, because failure to do so might mean the loss of a fish, the most important source of food for him and his family. He knew how to prepare many kinds of bait. He fashioned hand-carved fishing lures from shell and bone. This is a stone image of a fish god. The fishermen of early Hawaii had many religious ceremonies to learn and observe, for making a favorable impression upon the fish god ensured plentiful food for him and his family. He would never head out to the open sea without observing religious ceremonies at the shrine of the village fishing god. The ancient Hawaiian fishermen were among the best in the world in knowledge of fish habits. They were so intelligent about the habits of fish that when they walked toward the ocean with their nets, they knew what particular kind of fish they would catch. Because fishing was so important as a food source, it was not treated as a recreation. It was an occupation to ensure survival. They knew where each kind of fish lived, what it ate, and when and where it spawned. These ancient Hawaiian fishermen tried as closely as possible to think like the types of fish that they were after. They thought of what types of baits or lures would seem attractive to the fish. They mentally followed the fish into their homes and secret places. Unfortunately, when many people think or dream of life in early Hawaii, they visualize the men lying under the shade of a coconut tree, watching the lovely ladies or vahinis dancing a graceful hula. Certainly there were times when dancing, music, and relaxation was in order, but viewing life as a whole in those primitive times, just maintaining life demanded most of their time and effort. The early Hawaiian people were tough, disciplined, and used to hardship. According to accounts of the early white men to the islands, it was not unusual for the Hawaiian fishermen to paddle for hours in an outrigger canoe loaded with more than 1,000 pounds of fish. This is a drawing of a fish pond, which was built by early Hawaiian fishermen. The fishermen were also excellent swimmers. According to the early diaries of the white man, they could stay underwater from 3 to 4 minutes. This ability to stay underwater for long periods of time was necessary, for they built the rock walls of their shallow fish ponds up to a half-mile out to sea and in depths of up to 6 feet of water. The early Hawaiians caught the fish raised in these fish ponds whenever conditions made fishing from the open sea difficult or impossible. This is an example of an ancient fish pond of Oahu. It is located in Kaneohe Bay. Here is another fish pond, which is located in Pearl Harbor. It is estimated to be 400 years old. The rock walls extending into the water kept the fish from swimming to the open sea. Even their taro patches, like the one shown here, were used to raise fish. When there were poor weather conditions for fishing from the ocean, the mature fish in the taro patches were netted. The Hawaiian fishermen had a wide variety of other means for catching fish. They used nets, spears, lures, baskets, poison, clubs, stones, and even their bare hands to capture fish. One can almost feel sorry for the fish of those days. The fish were lured, tricked, trapped, speared, lassoed, and even intoxicated with poison. Modern fishermen can learn much from the ancient Hawaiians, who had only the simplest tools, bones or wood for hooks, and the fibers of a plant for fishing line. They fish with their brains, while we fish with equipment. We have our brightly colored feather lures, shiny steel hooks, our power boats and aqualungs, which give us all the advantages, yet we miss something that the ancients had. We have not learned the secrets of fishing because we have not learned the habits of the fish we are trying to catch. Modern equipment makes fishing easier, but it doesn't necessarily make it better. The most efficient method of fishing in ancient Hawaii was the use of nets. The nets ranged in size from small hand nets, used mostly by women and children, to large gill nets up to 250 feet long and 7 to 12 feet deep. When a small school of fish was spotted near shore, a throw net was used. This type of netting took extreme patience, for frequently many hours were spent waiting for the right conditions to ensure a perfect cast of the net. One perfectly timed heave of the throw net hopefully resulted in a school of fish captured for the fisherman's table. Look how widely a well-thrown net spreads out to entrap the school of fish. Sometimes whole villages participated in a type of net fishing called hukilau. A long, narrow net was spread in a large circle near the shore. The net had tea leaves tied along the top, which slapped in the water, frightening the fish into shore. The people of the village then pulled the two ends of the net toward shore, hopefully trapping many fish. The fish caught by the hukilau method were divided among the people of the village. Most of the ancient nets were made of alona, a strong vegetable fiber. The making of nets began with harvesting the alona plant. After the bark of the plant was stripped, soaked, and scraped, it was rolled and braided into line. Some of this line was put aside for use as fishing line, but most went into the making of nets. If the net was soaked occasionally in a mixture made from the bark of the kukui nut tree, it could be expected to last the lifetime of its maker. The inner bark of the hau tree was also used to make fishing line and nets. Bundles of hau bark are seen on the left, along with small strands of hau line. The heavier line on the right is called senet and is made from coconut fiber. In the shallow water near the shore, women and children also used fish traps, which were also a type of net. The traps were fashioned from natural plant material. The Hawaiians would tie a piece of bait in these traps, which would attract the fish through a one-way opening in the trap. The fish who entered the trap to feed could not escape through the one-way door. A somewhat easier method of fishing was by poisoning. The akia plant shown here being prepared by the fishermen were poisonous to fish. The leaves and bark of this plant were pounded into tiny bits and placed into small packets, which were then dropped into holes in the reef where fish might hide. Most fish were not killed by this poison. The fish were stunned, which made them easy to catch with their bare hands. Hand fishing, then, was another method of fishing in ancient Hawaii. This method took great patience and was done in shallow tidal pools from which fish could not escape. The Hawaiians caught many fish in this way, as well as eels, shrimp, and other crustaceans. Hand fishing was called ha'amau and was practiced at low tide, either by moonlight or by day. Because the Hawaiians were trained from early childhood to be quick of hand, hand fishing was a common and rewarding practice. This method was not without danger, however, because occasionally the fisherman was bitten by a puhi, or eel, which also lives in such holes. Because of the ever-present danger of eels, hand fishing is not very popular today. There are easier ways to catch fish than losing a finger. Here are some poison akia plants, along with several fish caught by the hand fishing method. The fish are called Moorish idols, or by their Hawaiian name, kihi-kihi. A favorite fishing lure of the early Hawaiians was fashioned from kauri shells. Kauris, or leho in the Hawaiian language, are among the most highly prized and collected seashells in the world because of their brilliant colors and highly polished surfaces. The fishermen use these beautiful shells to create octopus lures. The fishermen call these lures ipo, which meant sweetheart in English, because the octopus seemed to fall in love with it. The lure was made from a kauri shell and a stone of similar shape for weight and lashed to a piece of wood. Also on the back end of the wood, a bone or shell hook was attached. Only the finest quality kauris were used. Kauris which were dull or had large spots were discarded. Each shell specimen was chosen for its high gloss and many small red spots uniform in size. Kauris that had the proper kinds of spots but were not the right color were steamed over a fire of sugarcane husks that apparently turned them to the color desired. A good kauri was often named by its owner. In deep water, octopus are still caught by today's fishermen with kauri lures, which are copies of the lure made by the ancient Hawaiians. When the ancient fisherman hunted deep water octopus, he went to a likely spot and chewed on kukui nut to extract the nut's oil. He spit this oil onto the water to make the surface glassy and clear. He then lowered the lure on a line. If an octopus were there and the cowrie lure attractive, immediately one of the 8 tentacles would shoot out and grasp the shell. A moment later, more of the arms would reach for the lure until finally the whole body would come out of its hole and curl around the shell. A hard tug on the line would impale the octopus on the bone hook. When the fisherman felt that the hook had been securely embedded in the soft body of the octopus, he drew the line up through the water rapidly until the head was exposed. The line was then held so that the head of the octopus rested against the side of the canoe. With one swift blow from a club, the octopus was killed. This had to be done quickly because a large octopus might have a head the size of a basketball and tentacles 6 feet long. Many times fishermen caught small octopus. He would bite the creature between the eyes, which killed it instantly. When the octopus were brought to shore, the Hawaiians made it tender for eating by pounding it with rock salt until the arms began to curl. The Hawaiian fishermen did this by slapping it on a rock for a half an hour or so. It was then spread out on a rock to dry. To soften the octopus's flesh, fishermen of today usually throw the octopus in a washing machine and turn on the current. The ancient and the modern are mixed, as today's Hawaiian fishermen use a device of their Stone Age ancestors to catch the creature and a device of this electrical age to save themselves some work in preparing it. Here are some other lures the ancient Hawaiians made to attract fish. The lures are made from pearly shell, carved and shaped in such a manner as to skip on top of the water. A bone or shell hook was tied to the shell with a lona fiber. Colorful feathers were attached to the back of the lure to further attract the fish. The fish you see lunging for the lure is called by its Hawaiian name, aku. The English name for aku is bonito, or skipjack tuna. The small flying fish is called malolo in Hawaiian. Since flying fish are a favorite food of the aku, the lure was designed to look like a flying fish skipping over the water. This method of fishing is today called trolling. The picture is a painting by Herb Kawainui Kane, showing a canoe of Samoa with fishermen trolling for aku. The Hawaiians were also masters of the trolling technique. They sailed and even paddled their fishing canoes at a fast enough speed so that the lure skipped across the surface of the water. They located the schools of aku by observing the white no'io bird. When these birds were seen darting down to the water's surface, the Hawaiians knew that the birds were feeding on the flying fish, which were trying to escape from the aku. They would quickly sail through the school, with their lures skipping behind the canoe. Spearfishing was another method of the early Hawaiians. Hawaiian fishing spears were usually 7 to 8 feet long and were made from a number of different hardwoods. The tip of the spear was tapered to a sharp point. Although men, women, and children participated in this style of fishing, the men were the most efficient because they were also trained from childhood to be warriors, and so were expert marksmen with a spear. The usual method of spearfishing was to dive from canoes near the steep faces of coral reefs. The spear fishermen used carved spear holders on the arms of their outrigger canoes, such as the one shown here. The balloon fish you see at the tip of the spear is poisonous if not properly prepared. The Hawaiian name of this fish is o'opuhue. Another method of inshore spearfishing was done at night. At night, spearfishing was done in shallow waters, where fish were attracted to the bright lights of kukui nut torches. Fish, like moths, are attracted to light at night. For good torch fishing, the tide should be low, the water clear, the moon hidden, and the air still. If the wind is calm, the fisherman can watch everything in the 10 to 15-foot circle of lighted water around him. The torches were made from oily kukui nut kernels, strung on long, stiff spines of coconut leaf. The handle for the torch was fashioned from tea leaves. This painting by Herb Kane shows Cook Islanders night fishing by canoe. Torch fishing in Hawaii was also done by canoe. The oily kukui nut torches produced a smoky golden glow. The main tools of the torch fishermen were nets and spears. Torch fishermen usually caught eel and octopus, although occasionally some large fish were caught. Another technique of fishing was called kaka in the Hawaiian language. Kaka was a multiple hook method for deep-sea fishing. The type of fish shown here are red snapper and were caught in depths of up to 1,200 feet. The materials used in this bottom fishing technique were bamboo floats, which were short sections of bamboo to which the bone fishing hooks were tied, a large lava rock sinker, and olono fiber line. Here you see a close-up of the type of bone hook used in kaka or deep water bottom fishing. Note the similarity between the ancient bone hook and today's modern steel hook. Fish hooks were prized possessions in early Hawaiian society. Hawaiian craftsmen produced a wide variety of shapes and sizes of hooks. Look carefully at how these hooks were tied. The tying of hooks was very serious business to the early Hawaiians because the strength of the tie determined whether the fisherman caught or lost his fish. The tying of hooks was surrounded with strict kapus, or laws. The day before the fisherman tied his hooks, he warned his family so that they would be ready to observe the kapus. On the day of the lashing of hooks, all was kept quiet. No one was allowed to make a disturbing noise. The fisherman could not be interrupted or watched at his work. When all the hooks were lashed, they were put into an ipu, or gourd container, which was safely hung near the ceiling of the house. Their tools for producing these hooks were rough bits of lava and coral for sanding and shaping. They used sea urchin spines as drills and shell bits as saws. Most hooks were made from bone. They used the bones of pigs, dogs, birds, and even humans. These small hooks were produced from single pieces of bone. The tip of the small hook on the left has been broken off and lost. When a large hook was needed, it was carved in two pieces and then lashed together as the one shown here. Large hooks were usually carved from human bone because humans had the largest bones of all creatures in early Hawaii. The Hawaiians believed that a hook made from the bone of a person who had very little hair on his body would be lucky. The bone was supposed to be especially smooth, like the skin of the person, and therefore attractive to the fish. A hook made from the bone of a fishing expert was also thought to be blessed with special powers, which came from the skill of the person while he was alive. Sometimes the hook needed was larger than even human bone could provide. You now see the largest of the Hawaiian hooks, called Macau Mano. They were carved of hardwood and had a point of sharpened bone. They were large hooks, up to 11 inches long. Sharks were caught with this type of hook for sport and for food, except for those people who considered the shark their amakua, or family god. The Hawaiians wasted very little from the fish they caught. The tough, leathery skin on the belly section of the shark was used for Hawaiian drums. Even the teeth of the shark were used for making knives. Sharks' teeth are very strong and sharp, which made them especially suited for the cutting edge of a knife. The shark's tooth was very carefully fitted to a wooden handle, drilled and lashed as the one shown here. Larger weapons for warfare also use shark's teeth as the cutting edges. To conclude this presentation, I'd like to say a few words about conservation of Hawaii's sea life. Although fishing for large game fish in the deep sea is as good as ever, the schools of the best reef fish are declining. More food fish are being caught than are being reproduced each season. This situation calls for conservation of the ocean's resources. Hawaii's fishermen of today could learn much about conservation from the practices of the ancient Hawaiian fishermen. A sense of respect for all sea life warned the people of Hawaii's past not to take fish when they were not fully grown, nor to take more than they could eat in a single day. They let the young fish grow, and there was no waste from the catch they took home. When they found a good fishing grounds, they did not overfish it so that there would be no fish left. Certain areas of shore were kapu, or off-limits to fishing. The crossed sticks with kapa covering the top was the kapu sign, showing the early fishermen that the area was a no-fishing area. One stretch of shore was kapu for 1 month, then that area was opened and the next was kapu. The ancient Hawaiians thought not only of food for their families for tonight, but of the fishing for their children and the generations to come. In our time, it has been found necessary for the government to impose more and more regulations upon fishing. An example of this today is the no fishing regulations of Hanauma Bay shown here. The restrictions which the ancient Hawaiians imposed upon themselves and which at first were laughed at by the newcomers to Hawaii as native superstitions are now being imposed by a government bureau. Learn to conserve, respect, and protect our beautiful Hawaiian seashores and the life these Pacific waters can hold in abundance, not only for our own enjoyment, but for those generations yet to come. The early Hawaiians, with their respect for the sea, protected it with their methods of conservation, so that now we too can enjoy its benefits and beauty. For that we are deeply indebted to the ancient people of Hawaii. Let's hope future generations can say the same about us. Aloha.